I call this March 27, 2017 Board of Selectmen meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It was very nice. Nice and loud, everybody. Thank you. First thing, under the agenda, approval of minutes of March 13, 2017 regular meeting.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I move we approve the minutes of the March 13th, 2017 regular meeting as submitted.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? All those abstain? All right. Jeff wasn't here last time. I'd like to have Elaine call the appropriations meeting to order, or committee, excuse me, to order. Okay.
Call the Appropriations Committee to order for the joint purposes of the joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen, March 27, 2017.
Thank you, Elaine. It's now past the hour of 7, a joint public hearing with Appropriations Committee, FY 2018 proposed budget. John, you're on.
Okay, well, welcome, everybody. I can't believe we're back again at this point, working on another fiscal year. It feels like we're still closing out one and starting another, and we're moving in and planning for the next fiscal year. So this meeting, as the agenda indicates, is a joint meeting held between the Board of Selectmen and the Appropriations Committee. It's a public hearing if anybody wants to comment. And essentially, the purpose of the meeting is to give you a presentation on the 18 budget and what's going to be heading forward to town meeting later on in April. I'll spare everybody the suspense. There's nothing new, no major new initiatives or issues in terms of the services in the budget. It's a level service budget. That's something that you've heard for the last several years in a row here. We've got modest, revenue growth again this year, just as we've had for the last several years. And so the focus for us over the last, I'd say probably 5 years or so, has been maintaining the services that we have. And you know that from the financial trend monitoring. Also from the financial trend monitoring workshop that we do in December, you also know that a big component of what we do when we're working on our current fiscal year budget is to make sure that we're taking into consideration long-range implications, things like debt, financial planning, capital equipment, unfunded liabilities like our OPEB and our pension. So we always make sure that we bring those issues into the annual budget cycle so that we're not making decisions in a vacuum. The real short answer, yeah, I like a new slide here.
I like that.
On the left-hand side, you've got requests for service enhancements because you can always have better services and you can always bring more resources to bear. Staffing requests, new buildings, equipment. And then the other side of the scale, we have, long-term considerations like I was just talking about, debt, infrastructure needs, pavement management, unfunded liabilities like OPEB and pension. And last but certainly not least, balancing it with the tax impacts. And that's something we spent a lot of time talking about in our meeting in December with the joint meeting of all the boards and committees. We talk about how do we manage that tax impact. And we manage it backwards to what does it take in taxes, knowing what we know is happening with our other revenue sources, what does it take in terms of a tax increase so that we can maintain the services that everybody's expecting. But it's no secret, it's all about balance and sustainability. And I know you hear those two words constantly, but every decision that we make in any single current fiscal year, has repercussions down the road for debt, for liabilities, for insurance, if you're adding staff. So you got to work and always think from that perspective of making sure that you're balancing everything out. In terms of the goals, there's 4 standing goals that we have from our financial trend monitoring. And there's all sorts of individual objectives under these. I'm not going to get into too much detail, but just the 4 basic goals is important because these are the goals that all the things that the department heads do tie back into these. The first is protecting our financial condition, which means our ability to basically maintain our levels of services, what we just talked about, and deal with any interruptions, be they economic or environmental storms, whatever the case may be. And then you have natural things that are happening. The population's aging, the number of school children are declining. All those things factor into our services, and we need to be able to respond to those. We always put a budget together each year that is disciplined in that it's in conformance with our comprehensive financial policies. This budget in fiscal 18 is just like every one before it. There's no one-time gimmicks. There's no interesting accounting that we're doing to push costs off or not deal with problems in real time. We're dealing with everything that we need to in the current fiscal year, and we're not conducting ourselves in a way that creates any unsustainable practices. Unfortunately, what that means is when you have an issue in the current fiscal year, it means when you're faced with unpleasant information that we need to deal with it, not kick the can down the road. And there's a couple of things in this fiscal cycle that are going to be a little unpleasant that we're going to need to deal with. Overall arching, we want to make sure that Northborough maintains its affordability, both from a residential standpoint, but also operating a business. And last but not least, as I said 3 times now, any decision you make now, you need to be aware of the long-term repercussions and make sure that you're not short-circuiting the long-term financial condition of town to get what you think you want or need today. So those are the overall 4 overarching goals of the fiscal 18 budget. So let's talk about the assumptions into the budget. We have 4 main revenue sources. The first one, of course, is tax receipts. Right now, we're anticipating taxes are going to increase, or tax revenues are going to increase by about $2 million. That includes $30 million in new growth, which gives us roughly $521,000 in new taxes that we didn't have previously. This number, though, also includes, it doesn't mean that your taxes are going to go up 4.4%. It means tax revenues are going up. And a big piece of that is, baked into that number are all the debt exclusions for all the building projects that we have. Most recently, we have about $1.1 million total in debt service associated with the Lincoln Street building project, which was just completed. So that's baked into the tax increase. As far as free cash, we've been at our target for many years, $500,000. This is making sure that we don't have an over-reliance on one-time revenues into the operating budget. So we are staying with that policy target. Local receipts, these are things like motor vehicle excise, building permits, Board of Selectmen licenses, fines, all of those types of receipts that we get. Those are level funded about $3.7 million. We had some increases last year, particularly motor vehicle excise. We've realized that growth, but for purposes of this budget, right now, those are level funded. And then last but not least, our favorite topic is state aid. We're looking at $5.2 million, which is a 1.6% increase. So you all can realize very quickly, if our general expenses and our general budgets are going up about 3.5% or so, and state aid is only going up 1.5, there's only a couple places that's going to get made up, most likely in taxes, and constrained spending, of course. But those are the assumptions for the fiscal 18 budget. I just want to note the local receipts number includes the Algonquin Regional High School settlement payment. I think we're in the 3rd year, if I'm not mistaken, of 8, where they're going to be paying us for that settlement. I love this chart. This is a 30-year graph of state aid, and this little high point right here is fiscal 2003. We didn't get back to that level until fiscal 17. It's about $5.2 million. The real interesting thing here when you look at this graph, now these are recessionary periods, as we always talk about. So this is down and up, down and up, down and very slowly back up. That really graphically represents the slow economic recovery that we've seen. But if you talk about in fiscal 2003, having the same level of state aid that we have in fiscal 17 or 18, Obviously, with the time value of money, it doesn't have the same buying power. More importantly, this looks like state aid is going up, right? We look at it in terms of percentage of the budget. Back in 2003, state aid was 13% of our operating budget. In fiscal 17 and fiscal 18, it's 9%. So not only is there the time value of money, but as a percentage of our operating budget, state aid is falling off. And so there's only a couple places where it's going to be made up. And unfortunately, what you're seeing statewide is the pressure, again, on the local taxes and the local tax base. Again, this has been a trend we've been looking at for the last 9 years, and it's continuing. 1.5% is better than 0, but 1.5% isn't even keeping pace with the rate of inflation, never mind with the costs specific to Northborough, like our labor costs, our health insurance costs, our energy costs. It's not keeping pace. In the grand scheme of things, when you look at the, I jokingly, affectionately refer to this as the giant Pac-Man of taxes eating everything else. Northborough's budget historically has always been 78 to 80% funded with local real estate and personal property taxes. Very common in some communities that's a little larger, in some communities a little smaller. Usually the defining factor is the socioeconomic background of the community and how much state aid they get. I'll give a perfect example. I always say, if I got Shrewsbury state aid, I would have Shrewsbury's taxes. Shrewsbury gets 20% of their budget in state aid. If we got 20%, that would mean instead of 5.2 million, we'd have over 10 million in state aid. There's no magic to that. If I got 20% in state aid, our tax bills would match their tax bills. But from a socioeconomic background, the variables that go into the revenue sharing models and the various aid formulas, particularly Chapter 70, do not favor Northborough. So this is where we are at 9%. Departmental receipts, all these things are pretty stable and consistent. I think last year taxes were 78% or 78 point something percent. So again, it's pretty stable. In terms of the overall budget, this is the budget in brief. I'll draw your attention down to this figure right here. This is the general fund subtotal. So for the K-8 schools, the Algonquin Regional High School, general government, our assessment for Assabet, you add in all of the debt exclusions for all the projects, and there's the Lincoln Street project right there at $1.1 million roughly. Over the entire general fund, we're looking at about, in fiscal 18, a 2.78% increase. So let's talk about overall. That 2.78% includes several expenses that are baked into that number that aren't building budget base. And the two I draw your attention to is the one-time capital investment, which is our capital improvement plan. It's just under $1.5 million. So that's one-time revenues, free cash, budget surplus in the prior year being used to buy new equipment and make building improvements. That doesn't add tax impact, doesn't add debt. So it's an in and out, and every year that kind of fluctuates depending on how much free cash we have. The other is $200,000 into the stabilization fund. We have put $200,000 into essentially our savings account over the last several years, because we need to maintain our reserve ratio. Our policy says between 5 and 10%. Our goal is really to stay between 8 and 10%. That's where the bond rating agencies like to see us. So if every year your budget's going up 3 or 4%, and you're not contributing to your savings account, it starts to go down each year. So out of free cash, one-time revenues, we're looking to, as we did last year and the year prior, we're looking to capitalize that stabilization account and maintain that reserve ratio at around 8% in accordance with our policy. So when you factor all this in, you're looking at about a 2.78% increase for the general fund. So let's talk about the key budgets, the ones everybody focuses on, because there are a lot of things that go into overall what's happening with the budget, not the least of which are the debt exclusions for the various projects we've approved over the years, like the senior center, the library, and Lincoln Street. But in terms of operational budgets, the Northborough K-8 budget is going up about 3.2%. The general government budget, which is the non-school departments, police, fire, DPW, we're going up 3.8%. The Algonquin Regional High School, overall their budget is going up 3.8%. Our assessment, however, is going up 3.4% because it's based on the number of, our share of kids going to the school. It's based on the state's foundation budget and a number of other factors that flow through the regional agreement. I just want to bring you back to the first two, where the K-8 and the general government. When we did our financial trend monitoring and we did our projections, our 5-year projections looking forward about what our budgets can do to sustain services, we agreed that these budgets can go up about 3.5%. However, we have an issue with our health insurance, which we're going to talk about tonight. And when that issue came to light, the health insurance for all active and retired employees for the town and the schools is contained in the general government side of the budget. So when you look at the school's K-8 budget, there's no line item in there for health insurance. That's all paid for out of the town side. So when that health insurance budget started to spike, we reached out and we worked with the superintendent and the school committee. And I got to say, I'm very impressed with the level of collaboration and cooperation. Without hesitation, we were both at 3.5%. They reduced their budget a little bit. Ours went up a little bit. We essentially split the difference. I found about $70,000 or so in the town's budget, and she reduced hers. The superintendent reduced the K-8 budget by a similar amount, so that we can get to about an 8% increase in health insurance, because that's what we thought we were looking at. But that's the only reason why those two budgets are different. Historically, under the revenue sharing model, all the budgets go up comparable. So everybody's getting treated fairly based on the identified revenues that we have to work with. But right now, in order to maintain services, you're going to see between K-8, Algonquin, Assabet, and the town, we all need about 3.5% to maintain current level services. So the last key budget is Assabet. Assabet's our regional Voc school. Their budget's going up 3.5%. Our assessment, on the other hand, is going up higher. We have more students going. However, the debt service for their project, our share of the debt service is going down. The net effect is positive for us. It's only, their assessment's only going up a little over $12,000, or about 1.4%. So all of these things factor into the tax impact and how much taxes need to go up. But just so we're clear, though, there's nothing magical here. All these budgets and all these organizations need at least a 3.5% increase to maintain the current level of services. So let's talk about expenditures. This is the opposite, obviously, of the revenue pie chart. The vast majority of our budget goes towards schools, and these numbers here don't include the health insurance or the debt service for the school personnel or the school projects. But these ratios have been pretty consistent. Insurance and benefits are pushing 13%. They're starting to pick up. That's something, again, that we'll talk about. But otherwise, the ratios are pretty good. I'll draw your attention down here to this number. Debt and interest at 4.8%. That's a very good figure for us. Very well managed, our debt load for our community our size. It has a lot to do with our free cash policy and the fact that we talked to just a couple slides prior about $1.5 million in capital investment. That's all being done on a pay-as-you-go basis. We're not financing that. We're not adding to our debt load. So that's why that number looks good. That's why we've created capacity to be able to do large projects like the Lincoln Street project. The next project on the docket, and you've heard me say this previously, the next major building project that the town's going to be looking at is going to be the fire station. We need to renovate and add or find a new location for our fire department. That's a project. As soon as town meeting is over, that's the summer project. Working with the chief, we've appointed and the board's approved the building committee, but that's the next building project that's on dock. And the good news is that figure, and as part of our overall financial planning, we have capacity to do those big projects because we're not spending that money on trucks and running up the credit card on these smaller projects and equipment. In terms of the general fund, now, and I kind of gave you an overview of the big picture of what's happening across the organization as a whole, all of our assessments, all the key budgets, what's happening. I'm going to spend a couple of minutes now just talking specifically about the general fund, non-school budget. Right now, all of our contracts, our collective bargaining agreements are settled. We just finished settling the last one a couple of weeks ago, and that's the Northborough Municipal Employees Association. But they've all settled. Fiscal 18 across the board is a 2% increase for all union and non-union personnel. So that's baked into the overall increase. In terms of personnel increases, you know, and I said there's no major initiatives going on in this budget. The only thing that might be close to something, a new initiative, it's not really a new initiative. It's something that everybody in this room is aware of and has bought into, and that is we conducted some very thorough staffing studies. Several of the members in this room were on that staffing study committee. One of the things we did is we did very intensive operational reviews of our public safety departments. We ultimately added a couple of police officers and 3 or 4 fire department firefighter paramedics. The goal is to get to 5 staff per shift in the fire department. So we have been phasing that in over the last several years. Fiscal 18 gets us that last firefighter paramedic to get to the desired staffing that we all agreed was our target. So I couldn't afford to fit that position into the budget for the year, so it's going to come in mid-year in January, which is acceptable to the chief, and ultimately will get us to that desired level of staffing, which is pretty amazing that we were able to do that. But again, we phased it in slowly. The only thing that I'd add to that is whenever there's a request or a service demand of any kind, one of the things that I'm very proud of in our organization is we don't make knee-jerk reactions and we don't make emotional decisions that have long-term financial implications, particularly when it comes to things like staffing. You know, there were requests for 10 new police officers and 10 new firefighters. After a very thorough analysis and review and process, we came to the understanding of what we needed for staffing. We got agreement amongst all the stakeholders, including the employees in those departments, and we've been able to achieve it. And again, it's been incremental to get there, and it's taken several years to get there, but the important thing is that we are there. All right, I'm just stalling at this point. I don't want to talk about the last budget, the last bullet here. Our issue in fiscal 18 is the health insurance premiums are back on the rise. By way of reference, you've all seen this chart previously. If you look back here, fiscal 7, 8, and 9, the average increase in our health insurance budget was over 10%. Pretty much, if you have a 10% increase in your health insurance budget, it is robbing all of your resources to do any service augmentation, to add staff, to enhance what you're providing for the residents. In fiscal 12, in fiscal 10, we had another 10% increase. And if you remember, we negotiated plan design changes with all of the employees. And we did this before the legislation that was passed in fiscal 11 or 12, I believe, that allowed you to force that. We worked collaboratively with all the employee groups, and we were able to get almost no increase at all in fiscal 10. In fiscal 12, we had another bump coming with health insurance, and the teachers, through their contract negotiations, agreed to contribute 5% more to their health insurance costs. That's how we kept that reasonably under control. And then fast forward, we had several good years here. Fiscal 17, we were looking at, this is the fiscal year that we're in right now, we were looking at a 7 or 8% increase. We went back, we talked to all of the employees. They increased their co-pays. The town made some modification to some of the inpatient, outpatient deductibles, and we were able to get that increase down to 3%. So when you look back over 8 years, on average, our health insurance budget's gone up a little over 2.5%. That's pretty impressive. And it's through active management and working with the employees. Okay, you want to know what's going on in fiscal 18? Elaine says no. Well, this goes back to my comment of, good leadership is dealing with unpleasant and unfortunate information and not putting your head in the ground, and that's something this group has never, ever done. So I talked a little bit earlier about how the superintendent worked with the administration, the general government side, to get enough resources to our side of the budget to handle an 8% increase in health insurance. Well, no sooner did we get there, and the increases are not 8%. The overall budget increase right now is looking like something closer to 12%. So we have three carriers, primarily three carriers, without getting into too much detail of the plans, but we have Fallon, Tufts, and Harvard Pilgrim. Fallon's renewal, at the time that we set that 8% budget, came in at 4%, their premium renewals. Harvard Pilgrim and Tufts are right around 15%. And we had anticipated getting those numbers down because we had anticipated that we had a couple of months of really bad claims that were going to drop off the 12-month rolling average. Well, those months dropped off, and the months that came on were equally as bad or worse. So that number isn't going to come down on its own. So there's only one way to get from that 12% budget down to the 8%, which is what we actually have to work with in our fiscal 18 budget, and that's through plan design negotiations with all of the employees. Again, it's the same place that we've been in previous years. The only difference being this year, the information and the increases have come really at the end, and they've been much greater than I think anybody anticipated. The good news is the Insurance Advisory Committee, which is made up of all the bargaining units on the town and the school side, they've had 3 meetings already. I'd say the vast majority of the units are indicating that they're willing to work with us to try to get some plan design changes, some increased co-pays, possibly some deductibles being added to get the increase from that 12% budgetary increase from 12% down to what we have, which is 8. I'm cautiously optimistic. I would just say to you, without these negotiated plan design changes, right now our fiscal 18 budget is structurally unbalanced. Now, this is the same exact position that we were in fiscal 10. If you remember, we actually went to town meeting where we did not have a budget that was balanced pending these plan design changes. We had made a lot of progress up to that point, working with the employee groups, but it wasn't a done deal. So our goal is between now and town meeting to work through and try to get something that everybody can live with to get these numbers down. And when you're looking at the last 8 years of 2.5% on average or 2.57% on average increases, and we're saying we'd be excited and happy if we can get our increase down to 8%, that gives you some indication of what's happening in the market. What is unique to Northborough in terms of our renewals is that our loss ratios, our claims, are high right now. And they go high, they go low. They're high at the moment. If the market were calm and stable, I'd expect to get a 5% rate increase or a 5% budget increase in 18, just based on our claims data alone. However, you have to layer on top of what's happening with our claims the fact that the market is trending at 10% right now. All of our neighboring communities, everybody's dealing with this same issue at the moment. Except instead of being at 10% and trying to get it down, we're at 15%, trying to get it down to 8 if we can. So again, I'm cautiously optimistic that everybody, as always in this town, is at the table in good faith and working together. The cooperation with the school department and the Teachers Association has been fantastic. The municipal employees are all at the table. We're talking. We actually have another meeting this Wednesday. The goal of the Insurance Advisory Committee is for them to see the information, to have all of the data that we have, and for them to make recommendations to us in terms of how they'd like to see the plan design change to get that budget down to something that we can afford. So on Wednesday, I hope to have a better idea of where they stand. But this is going to be an issue that's going to have to unfold in real time, just like it did back in fiscal 10. But again, everybody's at the table, everybody's working together, everybody's talking, nobody's storming off. So again, I'm cautiously optimistic. The alternative is if we can't find that savings in the health insurance budget itself by negotiating plan design changes, then we'll have to make budget reductions to the tune of about $200,000. Is that my wife calling in?
Not you.
No? Okay. All right. I'm not going to spend a lot of time in the big picture. This is the summary chart from our collective meeting in December, where we talk about the trend monitoring. We look back 10 years in terms of our data trends, and we forecast forward 5 years, and we talk about where are the hot spots that we need to focus on. Well, it's real easy. The good stuff's in green, the bad stuff's in red. State aid, we already talked about. Pension liability right now is unfavorable, but as you know, we are on a funding plan for 2035. There's nothing more that we need to do. We have a funding plan that's being implemented. It's out of your hands. So although it's unfavorable, that will be improving. And then it comes down to these last two. Other post-employment liability, which is basically retiree health benefits, and capital investment, pavement management. So when we talk about that balance, that scale at the beginning of current demands and needs and services, balancing with long-term things, these are the two long-term pieces that we need to balance in this fiscal 18 budget. And the easiest thing to do, of course, is to abandon, if you get into a tight pinch financially on a personal level, the easiest thing to do is stop putting money in a savings account, stop contributing to your retirement, stop maintaining your house and your vehicles. I understand in the worst case scenario that you might need to do that, right? But if it's not that extreme, what do? You find the savings, you cut back, you constrain, you tighten the belt, and you still keep that balance by touching all those plates and all those important pieces to your overall financial condition, your overall financial wellness. It's no different for the town of Northborough. We need to do the same things. In terms of OPEB liability, we talked a lot about this in our joint meeting in December. I really wanted to see this number go up. Unfortunately, it's not in the financial cards this year. However, we are not going to be able to back off, nor should we back off our commitment to $500,000 putting aside for our OPEB liability, which, by the way, right now, it's just shy of $35 million. We are one of a handful of communities. You heard our auditor when he came in, and he went over the fiscal 16 audit. Remember what he told you guys? We are one of the few communities that are really making meaningful advances to funding our OPEB liability. $500,000 a year is substantial. It's not enough. It's kind of like when you start, what does a financial advisor always tell you? Start saving for your retirement early, even if you can only put $20 a paycheck, right? The idea is start early, make a commitment, and build on it. We started earlier than most, late in the grand scheme of things, but earlier than most other municipalities, and we will continue to build on that commitment. But this year, it's difficult for us just to keep that initial funding, but we need to maintain it. This is the history. I'm not going to read it to you, but if you come all the way down to this last bullet, we have now put $1.5 million into the Pension Reserve Investment Trust Fund. This is the trust fund you heard Representative Naughton talk about at your legislative priorities meeting. He said, have you taken advantage of the legislation? The legislation allows us to put our money in this investment vehicle, which is the best investment vehicle available to us. And yes, we took advantage of it, of course. But here's where we are right now. We got about $149,000 in interest generated. You know the multiplier effect. You know why you put money in your retirement early, because it grows. That's the whole point of this. I know this is a long discussion on OPEB, but this is probably the single biggest financial issue long-term facing not just Northborough, but all municipalities. There's a front page on the newspaper 2 weeks ago from Worcester. Retiree health benefits are unsustainable. What they're talking about is OPEB. So City of Worcester, all our neighboring communities, everybody's in the same boat. The difference is we've taken true, meaningful steps at resolving that. And we need to maintain that in 18. I wouldn't want anybody to think that, all of a sudden we want to add more staff or there's some budgetary issue, that this is where you go to get the money. This is not where you go to get the money. When things get tight for you personally, you cut back and you constrain your recurring expenses. You don't go pull money out of your savings account or your retirement unless it's absolutely dire. It's not absolutely dire here. We need to keep these fundings flowing. Pavement management, again, we've had entire joint meetings to talk about this. We need $1.1 million to maintain our roads. That plan was implemented last year. Scott Charpentier is here, our DPW director. We touched 20% of the roads in our town last year. This spring, you're going to see a whole lot of paving, a whole lot of infrastructure investment. Again, this is a plan that had its birth in studies that we conducted 4 years ago. So you don't study a problem just to know that it's there. Our job is to frame the issue, identify a problem or opportunity, frame it up, and then come to a solution. We have a solution, we have a funding plan, and we need to maintain it. This year, our friends at the state, again, I go back to your last meeting with your legislative priorities. We talked a lot. Our top priority was Chapter 90 funds. These are bond transportation funds that the town uses to fix its roads. 500,000. When the state, that's 200 million statewide gets us about $500,000. When they increase that to 300 million, we get about $800,000, roughly, give or take a little bit. Well, they went there, they went back. Right now, in order to maintain that 1.1 million, I'm going to be recommending that we use $300,000 in free cash, which is available funds, to patch that hole so we can maintain. If you remember, last year, we were in this exact same situation, and we used free cash. So instead of buying a pickup truck or something else, we're using one-time revenues to invest in our capital infrastructure. So when I present to you at your meeting on April 10th, the capital budget, this will be in it. So OPEB, pavement management, these are two long-term issues and long-term budgetary items that we're not going to abandon just because health insurance spiked up this year. Health insurance has spiked up. Deal with health insurance. And that's what we're doing. Everybody's favorite slide, tax impact. So right now, based on the projected budget, we estimate that the average tax impact on the average single-family home of about $408,000, it will be about $230. That number shouldn't be any surprise. We need about $230 or $240 tax increases to maintain the current level service budget. Now, this big disclaimer here at the bottom, that's assuming that the home values don't increase. And I'm going to be very straight with everybody right now. They've increased 3%, 3%, 2%, so it's the last 3 fiscal years. We anticipate it's going to go up a little. We don't know how much. It depends on what the single home values are doing. In the worst of the recession, when the housing market burst, the average single family home in Northborough lost about 13% of its value. We have gained back about 7% of that, and things continue to improve. Now, that's a positive thing. For most people, the single largest financial asset they have is their home. It's a positive thing that it's appreciating in value. It also shows that Northborough is a desirable community to live in because there's a relatively tight availability of homes for sale, again, driving the prices up. Now, what's happening is home values are going up, commercial industrial values, as you know from your tax classification hearing in November, they're not going up as much, and we're not getting as much new growth in terms of commercial industrial. So there will be pressure on that average single-family tax bill. At the point at which we set the tax rate, we'll know where our state aid is. And by the way, when we anticipate or we forecast that based on the governor's House 1 budget, that our local aid is going to go up about 1.6%. If by some chance the legislature, the House and the Senate, when they're done with their budget reviews, give us a little bit more state aid, at the point at which we go to town meeting and then we set the tax rate, if we get more state aid, the only thing it can be used for is to reduce the tax impact. We've always been conservative on our state aid. It's a potential Achilles heel for us, but being conservative, and again, being conservative is the only numbers we have seen to date are the governor's, that he released his budget on January 25th. Those are the only numbers we have. House and Senate haven't even thrown some spaghetti against the wall yet. We have no idea what they're going to do. We aren't going to know what our state aid is until well after town meeting, and hopefully before the start of the fiscal year. But home values are going up, kind of circling back to this slide, home values are going to go up. That tax impact is going to fluctuate a little bit depending on what that does and what commercial industrial properties are doing relative to that. But everybody always wants to know, if all things being equal, right now, if we pass this budget, what would be a tax impact? We're forecasting right now about $230. Wrapping up, in conclusion, our fiscal 18 budget right now, usually this top bullet says is balanced and within the confines of Prop 2.5 and town policies. I took the balance out, guys, and I'm drawing your attention to that fact. Right now, our budget is within the confines of Prop 2.5 and our town policies. It is balanced on paper, and it will be balanced one way or another at these levels. It's just a matter of whether or not that balance is going to come from getting our health insurance costs down, or if we're going to have to make reductions in budgets elsewhere to get to that number. If we can reduce our health insurance, it will have no impact on services or staffing. If we can't, we'll have to talk about that. And I'm not going to speculate right now because, again, we have a history now, 3 times in the last 8 years, we've worked with the employees whenever there's been a problem, and 3 times we got a solution where everybody working together, and that's where I'm going to tend to focus my time and energy on in the next several weeks. In terms of the budget, the core services are there. We're strengthening our public safety. We've strengthened our DPW. So the missions are all good. We're protecting our long-run solvency, things like OPEB and pavement management we talked about. What you'll see at your next meeting on April 10th is the capital budget. You know we're investing. We're putting a roof on the Proctor School, paying cash for it. We're replacing equipment in the police, the fire, and DPW, paying cash for those too. Again, these are available funds, one-time revenues being put to one-time uses. So we're continuing to invest in our equipment and infrastructure. And last but not least, as we talked about, going all the way back to December, that's when all the boards and committees were together and we talked about those forecasts. What was reasonable? What was sustainable? That 3.5% budget increase, that's what we all agreed on. And that's what we all need to continue to work within those confines. So, that's it. In a nutshell, that's our fiscal 18 budget. There's a lot in there. I will tell you, if health insurance had not gone crazy on us at the 11th hour, this would be a very, very solid budget. And it is still a solid budget. It's just going to take a little bit more work to get it in the confines that we all agree we need to live within. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody may have regarding the presentation.
Thank you, John. A little over 5 minutes, but.
It's very important, and I appreciate your indulgence.
Thank you very much. Jeff, go ahead.
Just more of a comment than a question, John. And it's like for those of us that have been through this a few times, it's kind of the reoccurring theme is that, it's a conservative budget and it's sustainable. And I don't think that can be emphasized enough. That, year after year, we go into town meeting with a budget with, I don't want to call it a guesstimate, but best estimates of what we think it's going to be. And generally, if anything happens, the tax impact comes down a little bit. And I think that's good. I think it's important that people realize that, it is a conservative budget and that, there's an emphasis on sustainability, so.
Absolutely.
Leslie?
Yeah, I just want to thank you for doing this, and I think it's important that you do go through all these details for people who are viewing in the audience and through TV, because that way anyone who is really truly interested will tune in and listen at some point before town meeting and won't be surprised by the fact that this health insurance issue will evolve in real time. I think that's a good point that you made. And I appreciate the fact that you're doing your best to collaborate with everybody and come up with as many options as you can. And we have a lot of trust and faith in you, and we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Don?
Yeah, and a great presentation, and it's good to hear that you have positive hopes for the insurance working out with the employees.
Yes.
And that it's going to at least be a process. The only question I had, debt exclusions. Do we have any retiring soon? I know it's not going to help us in this budget, but what's the new?
Yeah, if you look at, if you look at the budget and brief slide, it's back there. There we go. So if you look at the budget and brief, down here are all the debt exclusions. So what you see here is, so this is the Z School, it's going down 34,000. Colburn Street's going down a couple grand. The library debt service going down. So these are dropping off. It's one of the reasons why. So overall, debt in the fiscal 18 budget, our debt service is about $2.9 million. It's actually $75,000 less than it was last year. So we have, at this point, we were facing increasing debt because the Lincoln Street school debt was coming on, phased over a couple of years. But as time goes by, this is, this debt is decreasing. Even the Lincoln Street debt right here is down $20,000. So it starts to drop off. And so as it drops off, if we're all doing our jobs well, as it drops off, it creates capacity, and that's when you see the lulls where usually we're a big project like the high school project. The day I'm going to be excited is when that $660,000 of debt service that's baked into the Algonquin right here, $660,000. When that drops off, you basically have the equivalent of debt service to fund a project like the library or the senior center or the fire station. So we watch those things very carefully. So the debt's always falling off. It's declining principal. It's the way it's all structured. But we just had a lot of debt come on with Lincoln Street. But it will continue to slide off. And we'll be adding at some point debt on for a fire station project. So yeah, it is sliding off. It comes on sometimes. I won't say it comes on faster than it comes off. In Northborough, frankly, it comes off and comes on, and it gets maintained because it's being actively managed very well.
Thank you.
Jason?
Bill, thank you. I think I just want to start out just by observing that what I like about all of this over these last several years is the discipline that we've had in each fiscal year for how the budget gets constructed. We have the discipline of the free cash policy to take care of our smaller capital items and conserve the debt capacity for these larger projects. We've got the discipline of trying to meet our long-term financial obligations as we're undertaking now for the OPEB issue and the debt management policy. It's just like year after year after year, there's a great deal of attention given to this, and I really appreciate it. And I think it's, reflects well on the progression over the years about how we managed to weather some downturns in the economic arena without putting too great a additional tax burden on the residents. So having said that, I want to thank a lot of people in the room. I want to thank John and his staff because each year, and particularly this year, when some of the news is late breaking and they're forced to scramble to try to get all the budget information in place, it's a lot of extra time, a lot of extra hours. People don't really see that. They just see the finished product a lot of times, so thank you all for that. I want to thank a lot of the department staff and the bargaining units who have all participated in trying to make ends meet, literally, to get us where we are today. And I want to thank the Appropriations Committee because nobody gives the budget greater scrutiny than they do, and it's through their review and feedback and everything that kind of keeps us on a stable course and keeps everything sustainable. So, thank you all. Appreciate it.
If I may, Bill,
Go ahead.
before I don't want to forget this, I do appreciate the work that all of the department heads do, but there are a couple people that do deserve to be called out. I've got June Hubbard-Ward, our finance director here, Jason Little, the town accountant, and Kim Foster, the assistant town administrator. This is the financial team. These are the people that are putting the time into getting us where we are today. This is not a one-person show. Everything that we do here is a team effort, from the staff to the boards and committees, and then out to the public. The thing, I say this every year, the thing that makes Northborough different, the thing that makes Northborough special, in my opinion, is that we have a groups of people that want to work together and find solutions to difficult problems and issues rather than fight about them. And when you have a budget that comes in with an 11th hour surprise and the school department comes over and they want to be part of that solution on the front end, I think that speaks volumes to the types of relationships that we have. The fact that the Board of Selectmen and the Appropriations Committee are on the same page, that you have all been part of creating these financial policies, these fundamental principles, these rules of engagement, and you know the importance of staying true to them as we go through surprises. It could be a cut in state aid, it could be an increase in health insurance, it could be any number of budget surprises. We've seen just about everything that you can imagine over the last 8 years. But we stay true to those budget principles and we work together, and that's why when we get to town meeting, everybody's on the same page. And I think the best thing you could hope for as a citizen is to go to town meeting and see all of your officials in their leadership roles having worked together for 9 months to bring you something that they think is worthy of your support. And fundamentally, that's the defining factor, in my opinion, that makes this town different than others. And so I want to thank all of you, both these boards and committees, for everything that you guys do to allow us to get to town meeting working together.
Thank you, John. I'll open up any questions from Appropriations Committee. Bob, yes?
Thank you. Yeah, great presentation, John, as usual. The only thing that I might want to add is, like, a lot of people probably will question, you know, the Northborough crossing and its impact to our tax base. Maybe you want to mention that in your presentation as an additive, because people are going to question, how come that's not really helping us and things like that. So, you know, I mean, you know.
Yeah, so, well, first of all, Northborough Crossing is not a new revenue source for us. I think the thing to keep in mind with Northborough Crossing, and we spend more time, when we set the tax rate in November, we spend an entire meeting talking about the tax base. It's 80% of everything that we do is based on our tax base. So we've got several financial indicators to watch our tax base, but in November, we spent a lot of time as a group talking about what's going on with our tax base and our top 10 taxpayers. The best way I can answer it is, during the worst recession in 80 years, our services held, we didn't have to lay people off, and our taxes, according to the Boston Globe article in 2014, they did all the 52 or 56 Metro West communities, they looked at the tax increases over a 10-year period. Northborough was not near the bottom. Northborough was the lowest of all those communities for 10 years, and that's discipline. So where'd that money go? That money came in when the mall was built, and it's about $2 million in tax revenue that we see. That came in, that stabilized our local economy, and stabilized our local taxes, and the individual residents and homeowners saw very little increases in their taxes because that's where it came from. What we could have done under Prop 2.5 is we could have taken that money, raised all your taxes as well, and expanded our services greatly. We could have added a lot more staff and done all sorts of things. And we didn't, because we were disciplined, and we knew that this is a one-time, a big development coming in. You're not going to see a development like that every year. You're not going to see something like that, maybe every 10 years. But basically, those revenues came in, and the most important thing that they did for us is they gave tax relief to the residents who saw very, very modest. There was a 5-year period where the average tax increase was $98. There were some years where the average tax increase was 0. Well, how was that accomplished? We don't have a printing press in the basement. The copiers won't print money, won't copy money, I checked. So that's how we did it. That's by and large is how we did it. So it's not a secret. But that mall and that development continues to help us out. Now, what you might think of as, we've got that second phase of the mall there, overall, in fiscal 17, the year that we're in right now, we had about $40 million in new growth. At the peak of the mall, we had 92, right? The year before that, we had 30. So we're planning for 30. That's what we're seeing. So when we try to figure out and forecast, what do we have for new growth? What do we have for new tax revenue? We look at all the permits that are in the pipeline. We don't just look at data. Data is important. But if you just look at data, right, what would you do? You take your new growth for the last 7 years and average it. There isn't going to be another mall coming in. You need to put your knowledge of the organization and the community in there. Right now, based on everything we see, we're looking at 30 million in new growth for next year. So the town doesn't grow exponentially every year. It goes in spurts, and you kind of have to absorb that growth and get comfortable with it. And at some point, we will see some additional new growth, particularly down at the Gutierrez property off of Bartlett Street. It's 100-plus contiguous acres of industrial zone land. It will develop at some point. It's not today, it could be tomorrow, it could be next month, I can't tell you, but it will come. The thing that we have that a number of other communities don't have is we have the raw materials for additional economic development. Some towns are built out. They're not going to see it. Where we have that capacity, we have those raw materials, and it will come, it's just a matter of when. It was a long answer, but I love when people say, all that money from the mall, where did it go? It went to keep your taxes reasonable. And how do you know that? Because we have levy capacity. And the levy capacity was created because we didn't raise your taxes under Prop 2.5 as high as we could have. That's where it went.
I know the answer.
I know you do, Bob. And even though we're making,
Thank you.
and even though we're making great eye contact, I know I'm talking to somebody else. So
You're not going home, you're staying here till the end, just so you know.
You're the official straight man.
Anybody else has a question from Appropriations Committee?
I know all this all.
Any other questions or comments or anything?
Try and throw 'em up.
Elaine, no questions
no
from you?
comments, Elaine?
No?
Well, other than you did a fantastic job.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Everybody else has already said that, but I did want to be redundant, but I said it anyway.
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor?
I want to thank the Appropriations for coming this evening. You guys, you don't get paid for this, you
We
come,
didn't have any choice, Bill.
you don't have any choice, you're forced into
We
it.
had to be.
We appreciate you coming.
We refer to it as mandatory fund.
Oh, mandatory fund,
Thank you anyway, though.
But we enjoyed
Take
our
care.
time immensely.
you did. And
Thank you very much.
Good night.
good night, thank
See
you.
you, Tony.
Take it.
Take
Bye,
care.
Tony.
Nice
Good
to see you.
everybody.
Thanks for that question, that's great. Rich, you have fun? All right.
John, you sure you don't want Bob to just stick around for the rest of it?
Exodus, right?
Throw questions at you?
You know what, talking about that, not to go on, John, but I mean, it's being informed, being conservative, disciplined, working collaboratively with the other organizations in the town. I mean, that's what it's all about. I mean, you guys did an excellent job.
Thank you.
Okay, it's definitely now past the hour of 7:40 PM. How you doing? Just in time. We have a public hearing to consider an application as submitted by Compete Incorporated, doing business as Romaines Wood Grill and Bar, to alter the premises located at 299 West Main Street, where an all-alcoholic beverages restaurant license is in effect.
Yeah, actually, we just, pretty much mostly cosmetic. We did change the entrance in the foyer walking in. The square footage stays the same. Seating stays the same as before. Just trying to have a new look, you know,
Yep.
update.
Very good. Any questions? Yes.
So it is simply the entrance area? Is that what you're?
Well, I mean, we changed like the carpet and, you know, the
Oh.
ceiling and paint and everything, so it's a
Yes.
new look.
Okay.
But as far as for like the, any kind of structural changes, that's pretty much the only thing. The foyer, when you walk in, instead of going straight, the
Yes.
door goes to the left. We're just trying to ease some of the congestion walking, you know, when there's a crowd in the entryway, whenever we get busy. So we're just trying to ease that up. And that's pretty much it. It's not.
John?
Just for clarification, it's simply the modification to the entrance triggers the alteration of premises, which makes it come back to you. So, you know, it could have easily been a much broader change to the layout. That's just not the case here. In fact, the place is going to look fantastic when you guys are done, so it's all good.
Excellent. The menu changed at all?
Yeah, a few menu changes. We're gonna try and ease into that. Some of the regulars are not happy with some of it. They
Don't
want me to-
upset the regulars,
Yeah,
you
they don't
know.
want- They don't want me to change too often.
That's it. Change is good, though.
Yeah, no, I
Change
think
is
so too.
good.
That's why it was time to update. It's been 11 years since our last remodel, so.
Can I still vote for the duck?
Yes. Okay. Well, you're in charge, so.
We already heard.
Okay. All right, any other questions? Do- Yes, it's a public hearing, of course.
Your name and title, please.
Yeah, I'm Richard Romaine. I'm the owner of Romaine's. You're welcome.
Okay. And it's a public hearing. Any other comments from the public?
My
Yes.
name is Subbu Kota. I am the Boston Group, right across 21 Southwest Cutoff Road. We are businessman as a restaurant. I never been to your place, but I keep watching you. Traffic is increasing, that's good, you know. We need more businesses, you know. When we want to take people out, we need to have a place like this. We
Well,
want success.
Appreciate it.
Just want to support you.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for that comment. Appreciate it. Any other comments? Hearing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I move the board vote to approve the application as submitted by Compete Inc. A. Romaines Wood. Front light. Okay, I just have a couple. This one sounds kind of funny, but I'm going to ask it anyway. I'm asking Scott Charpentier Mosley as the DPW director. I was on Otis Street today, passing by Armino's, and there is what looks to me like a random cement stairway that is off the edge of the building, right on the edge of the road. And so my first thought actually was, that's an accident waiting to happen, potentially, because it's something that, it doesn't take much if you're going to be off that road a little bit to hit it, and it could be a bad accident. But then I wonder about the plowing as well. Have you ever run into problems, and has that been brought up before? It just looks odd to me there.
I'm familiar with the stairs you're talking about. I believe that's an egress door. The plow operator that does Otis Street is well aware of the location of those stairs, and that corner in itself is.
You can always
very
clip them
small.
off.
Cautious corner to go around. I don't know if those stairs are required for egress for the structure or not. I do know the stairs you're talking about. They're precarious, to say the least.
Very, and it's literally at the edge, right at the edge of the road, so I didn't know if that caused a problem.
Horrible location for stairs.
Yeah, okay. Chief, has that been the site of any accidents or anything like that? Anybody hitting that?
On the other side of the street.
Oh.
Barely going into the pond.
People don't want to hit the stairs.
Yes, exactly.
Come to those
They use
stairs.
the dock.
I'd rather get in the barn than the stairs.
Yeah, okay.
It's the dock of the stairs.
Yeah.
I honestly can never think of anybody that's ever hit them.
That's stunning to me. Okay, I almost did looking at it, but anyway.
You have to slow down to make that curve.
So it's
so-
rubble.
Exactly. So thank you very much, okay. And secondly, John, obviously the Lincoln Street School Building Committee, of which I was a member, hasn't needed to meet since the ad rent is complete. Is there any, are you aware of any issues concerning Lincoln Street School, anything residual?
No.
What is the status?
That's a great question. So, under the Massachusetts School Building Authority, MSBA, we cannot close out the project until 10 months after the date of substantial completion. So, right now, we're working with our owner's project manager, and they're working with the commissioning agent that comes in to test the building envelope, to test the HVAC and the windows, to make sure that everything was built according to spec. That's a service that MSBA provides at no charge to the town. So the commissioning agent is doing their work. There's a punch list that needs to be done. Everything in the building's done, my understanding is. There's a punch list for some of, a little bit of looming and seeding that needs to occur on the landscaping, which is typical. But then the actual project closeout won't happen until, I believe, it's 10 months, and I believe it's sometime in early July. That's when the project will be officially closed out by MSBA. We'll know what our complete reimbursement rate is under the grant, and the project in their eyes will be completed. As far as us, the punch list is all done, as I said, except for a little bit of site work, looming and seating specifically, and commissioning work that's being done, and we're just waiting for the closeout. So, and again, the project, I'm excited because I want to see how far under budget this project came in. I know it's at least $1 million under budget, but what we don't know is how much of that is the state share versus how much is the town share, because they reimburse for different rates for different things. So we won't know how much of that money will be available to the town for, more than likely, our next building project, which would be the fire station, until July. But by all accounts, everything is going as well as it possibly could. So no action for us to take. We're just, again, the commissioning's happening, and we just need to get to the point where they can close the project out and we part our ways. So,
Great.
it's all good. It's all good, though. There's absolutely zero issues or problems or anything negative. That's been a fantastic project for the town.
Absolutely. I've heard nothing but great things, so. But I
Must have
just
been the
wanted to
chairman of
check.
that committee that ran that.
Well, I thought you meant the chairman of the Board of Selectmen. I'm like, well, thank you.
I was referring to the building committee, but yes, the chairman of the Board of Selectmen as well. A strong secondary influence on that project.
Get excited for a second.
That was a great project, so thank you, John.
It's a
Yep.
beautiful building.
That is my report, thanks.
Oh, Jeff?
Quick one.
Yes.
And I talked with John about this last week. Got a call about the sign on Lincoln Street, the flashing, I guess it's a school zone sign.
Yes.
And folks were concerned. They said sounds like it may have gotten a mind of its own. It was going off in the middle of the night and,
Flashing.
like 11:30 at night, it was flashing, et cetera. I know you had said that we had a supplier that looks into those things. I'm just wondering if we heard anything.
Do we know if it's been repaired yet?
It was to be repaired.
Yep, so
Last week, I'll follow up with that.
Yep, so you had sent that in, Jeff, as you say. We sent it right off to the company that maintains that. We have a contract with them, and so they could have gotten out there. So unless they're waiting for a part or something, if it's not fixed yet, it should be imminently, but we can certainly follow up
Will
on
they
that.
normally give you guys an update on that? I guess,
Yeah,
when they
if
go out there?
typically they'll give us some feedback. They'll say if somebody hit it, or it got hit by lightning, or it was, or a part, went bad in it. Sometimes what happens is during storms, if we lose power, it throws them. It's kind of like when you wake up and your alarm clock's blinking. That's what happens to these. You would
Well,
think
better
there's
for-
no USB that's built into these things, so when they lose power, sometimes they get off cycle.
I'm sure a power surge too.
Yeah, and they're very, this is very old, antiquated systems. And so if you remember going back before the lights were replaced in the downtown, everything was timed, and over a period, it would gain a little bit, so it gets out of sync. So, but we just call the company, they come in.
I
they
remember when we
reprogram
had the stagecoach and the guy with the lantern out there. So.
They're not that old, but,
Okay.
That was in your last
but
life,
certainly,
Jeff, I think.
but certainly if you're hearing from folks that it is still an issue, definitely give us a call. It's not an issue, we can get that fixed right away.
Thanks. That's my report.
Okay, Don?
Lincoln Street must be a problem area, because I don't expect an answer tonight, but I got two residents that called me about streets and the paving projects. And Lincoln Street, is it going to be repaired? It's where the gas line went in, it's a little rough driving. And Milk Porridge Circle. So I don't know if you can answer that tonight, I didn't really expect you to.
Excuse me, the Lincoln Street. Lincoln Street is out for bid for reconstruction from the pavement joint all the way to Pleasant Street. Pleasant Street's up for bid as well, but that's a bid alternate depending on where the prices come in. I'm hoping we can afford to do Pleasant Street from the apartments to Upper Church. Milk Porridge is not on our plans for paving this year.
Is it on the plan sometime?
There's some water service issues around Milk Porridge we need to address before we spend any money on paving the roadway. We've had to replace a series of water services in the neighborhood, so that's one of our ongoing water issues that we're addressing, so. We're aware of the condition on Milk Porridge, though.
All right, thank you. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Don. Last Tuesday, I had the opportunity to go with Andy Dowd to the fire station to officially swear in the new firefighter that John was talking about, Dylan Kessler. It was a wonderful presentation, did it in front of the fire truck, a lot of the guys were there. And then afterwards, I had the opportunity to go out to see the SCBA maze, which is self-contained breathing apparatus
Very
maze.
good.
Right? How am I doing?
Very good.
Not to be confused with scuba.
Not to be confused with scuba.
Right, exactly. And it's a simulated, I'll let the chief give you more in detail, simulated maze for the guys to go through, and it's dark in there, and there's all kinds of traps, and they change them around and stuff. And it was given to the town of Northborough free from the state for training, so.
Yeah, it's a tractor trailer unit that the state hauls all around, and one of our guys called up and scheduled it through our training committee. And what it is inside, it's all, for lack of a better word, chicken wire, okay, and movable partitions. So you can go through one time and have to go left, right, up, through, over. There's 3 stories in there, okay? And they have to go through the whole thing, and we time how long it takes them to get through. We check their air consumption, how much air they go through, so we know, are they lasting 25 minutes on a bottle or 15 minutes on a bottle? And if so, what do we do to change that? And what's interesting, and I don't know if you got to see it or not, Bill, but there's all infrared cameras in there as well.
I
So-
watched that.
So the state sends 3 instructors that spend the whole day there, and they observe the infrared cameras, and if you get caught, you get stuck, they can call out and say, okay, you're in a dead end again, because some guys end up in the same dead end 3 or 4 times, you have to back out and do this. But it's excellent training, and what's most amazing is that it doesn't cost anything. The state, we call them up and they say, okay, yep, we'll have it there. They drop it off, it's right there, and then when you're done, they pick it up. They send 3 instructors, which is terrific, and they take you through each simulation. We did 2 groups in the morning for 4 hours, and 2 groups in the afternoon for about 4 hours, and it was just terrific.
Yeah, I watched them on the infrared cameras. You can see the guys crawling through, and you can hear them breathing, and they have to go, down up like a little corridor, and then up a hatch, and then across, then up another hatch, 3 stories.
We intentionally don't record it because you can hear everything.
I didn't say, I just said breathing, didn't I?
You put that thing in for the 3rd time,
Yeah.
but
But it's very interesting, and it's great that it's free, and
Yeah.
it's great that they're being proactive and taking advantage of a lot of the free stuff for training purposes from the
Would
state.
hate to do that.
Yeah, they wanted me to go, and I said, I'm a little too old for that thing. I'd be like,
And all of our guys went through it. The other name for it is the confidence course. And again, that's the purpose is, we just don't have the fires we used to have. So we have to find other ways to get our guys confident in their equipment and their training, so that's one of the tools.
it was excellent. Yes, go ahead, Lynn.
The first thing that strikes me, though, is thank God the state is investing in that kind of thing, because we're talking about saving lives. There are too many incidents that I've seen lately on the news, horrifying things, and I think the more training they can get, the better. I think that's awesome.
And just a couple months ago, and I had mentioned in my letter to you, in my report, that they came in and they did a full, what they call bailout training, to teach our guys how to get out of a higher level window, and that didn't cost a cent. They sent the instructors over, set it all up, we're there for 2 or 3 days, went through the whole, all it costs us to cover the guys when they're doing the training. It just works terrific.
But it's amazing. I mean, that was impressive. I was
Awesome.
impressed. So, that ends my report. John?
No report.
No report. Okay, the next thing is public comment. Okay, moving along. New business, approve and execute the warrant for the annual town meeting, which you have in your packet.
Yes. Well, we have
Actually,
Nope.
a revised copy for you
Oh, I'm
tonight.
sorry. A revised copy.
So, working diligently to cut down the number of articles.
Yes.
We actually,
we
working
like
with-
that.
We're actually working with
Number-
town council. There was an article on here regarding the Colburn Street cell tower that we own when we purchased it. There was originally an article in there to get authorization to enter into a lease agreement greater than 3 years. We can only sign contracts for 3 years without, or less, without town meeting approval. But Kim Foster, the Assistant Town Administrator, working with Town Council, was able to determine going back that under the initial acquisition, we actually have the authority through the Conservation Commission to issue out a new RFP because the lease is up. So therefore, we don't need to have that on town meeting, so that came off. Otherwise, the articles are renumbered based on that one coming out, but otherwise, it's the same articles and the same warrant. And town council does need to review some of the language, particularly the zoning, so the motion would be subject to, finalizing some of the language. But for tonight, you would vote to post the warrant. The authorization would be to post it as required by a town bylaw no later than April 10th. And that's it.
Okay.
Oh, I did want to mention that we did put back on, it's been on and off, an article regarding the White Cliffs debt service, because we're still waiting to determine whether or not we're going to be able to proceed with that procurement based on the remediation. Town council's recommendation was definitely put a warrant article on there. If you don't need it, you pass over it, but it should be on there in case it comes up.
You just pass over if we need.
And also at our next meeting too, if you have any preference on any of the articles, let us, we'll cover that, I think, in the next, right?
Yes, you'll be hopefully taking up your recommendations for some of the, particularly the budget articles, but then also determining what, if any articles you'd like to sponsor in terms of reading the motions and so forth.
So we'll do that in the next one.
Yep.
Okay, do I hear yes?
Yes, you do.
Jeff, thank you.
I move the board vote to approve the annual town meeting warrant and execute the warrant after final review and coordination by the town administrator and review by town council, and that the warrant be posted as required by the town's bylaws no later than April 10th.
Second.
Hear a motion in 2 seconds. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Okay, thank you. The next thing is approve and execute the warrant for the annual town election.
In your packet is the warrant for the May 9th town election, and it just requires your approval and execution this evening.
Any questions? Pretty straightforward. Do I hear a motion?
Let me do it?
I believe it's, Jason, you have
Oh,
your...
I'm sorry. Yes, I did. Clearly, I thought this was.
You're still on the budget, aren't you?
I was going to improvise.
I know you were, yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I move the board vote to approve and execute the warrant for the May 9th, 2017 annual town meeting, town
Second.
election, excuse me.
Hear a motion in a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. That's, it's not usual. Any other business that come before the board? Hearing none. Next thing is execution, executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21, subsection 3, litigation and collective bargaining. Due to the chair's determination that a discussion regarding this matter in an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the position of the board.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I move we go into executive session pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21, subsection 3, litigation and collective bargaining, due to the chair's determination that a discussion regarding this matter in an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the position of the board.
Second.
Hear a motion and a second. Jason.
Aye.
Leslie.
Aye.
Jeff.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. We'll only be coming out, after we come out of executive session, I can't even talk to you, isn't that awful? We'll be adjourning from open meeting.